They haven't been told, but you are.
Sure. But we were starting with Martha.
Yeah.
I like it.
I know, it's like the card was a little before the horse.
Yeah.
You're legit though.
Okay, good. I wouldn't want to illegally bang you.
Yeah.
The greatest sin.
So do we wanna do roll call before we skip to the introduction of committee leadership?
I wasn't sure if it needed to come first before anything else, or if we want to do roll call first.
Let's go ahead and if you don't mind, let's open the meeting and do the roll call so that we know that we are actually in a public meeting and
Okay.
yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for your time and thank you for being here. I am introducing us for the first time and I guess we'll officially explain that in a few minutes, but first, I think we're gonna do roll call.
All right, Town of Ashland, Mr. Martin,
Present.
Mr. Root,
Here remotely.
thank you. Charles City, County, Mr. Walton.
Here.
Chesterfield County, Mr. Plymale,
Here.
Mr. Richwine.
Yeah.
Goochland County, Mr. Basham,
Here.
thank you. Hanover County, Mr. Raznick. Henrico County, Mr. Dixon. Newcastle County, Ms. Guthrie. Here. Chamber RVA, Mr. Easter. City of Richmond, Mr. Bunn.
Present.
Ms. Erickson. Mr. Brackman.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Smith. League of Women Voters, Ms. Weisiger. Here. Ms. Rosenblum. NAACP, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Willis. Office of Equitable Mobility, Ms. Rowan. Mr. Moore.
Here.
RVA Rapid Transit, Ms. Walker. Ms. Power. RAVA, Mr. Burnley.
Here.
Mr. Hamilton. Virginia Conservation Network, Mr. Gordon. Ms. Higgins. Virginians for High Speed Rail, Mr. Testerman.
Here.
Senior Connections, Mr. Williams. And VCU, Mr. Leonard.
Present.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for attendance. We have a quorum.
Great, and before we move forward, I wanted to note that we have two new members of the committee present today. The first is Mr. Walton, who's representing Charles City County. Welcome to the committee. Do you want to introduce yourself to anybody? Would you like to introduce yourself, give your background or anything like that?
Well, it's not much background. I've been a construction worker all my life and basically after I retired, I took up a machinist trade. So electrical and machine was going together. And I'm trying to get involved with the Charles City thing. I'm on the planning commission there and on a couple other committees. And that's about it.
Great, well, thank you for being here. And then second, we have Mr. Brackman, who is the new Richmond alternate. Thank you for being here, and do you want to say anything about yourself?
Hello. Yeah, I'm Alex or Mr. Brackman, and I really don't have a lot of actual like education experience behind this, but I just really love transportation and everything around it, and I'm just hoping to get more involved in it, in this community, in this area.
Great, thank you very much for being here. We definitely have a wide array of backgrounds represented here, so not being specifically educated in the transportation field does not in any way preclude you from contributing meaningfully here, so thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, point of information,
Absolutely.
and some other people may know about this, but Wyatt Gordon, who represents VCN, I think I read he just got a Fulbright scholarship and
Is
will
now
be
in
moved to
Berlin,
England, so
yes.
we will probably want to make a note of that.
I was gonna ask you about that, but yeah, we'll definitely wanna reach out to them and see if they want to appoint somebody new. He's living in Berlin for like a year or two now, yeah. Fulbright scholarship is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Richard Haken, that had been representative for RVA Rapid Transit when Faith Walker couldn't be here, he now is the executive director of Partnership for Smarter Growth. He might be a good choice to join the VCN allocation.
Absolutely.
Lisa, you are, I think, a fortune teller because we're actually gonna get to that. So, good job.
Well, and that's a great time to switch it over to Martha to kick us off with the agenda then.
Sure, yeah, thank you so much. Just for also, I think, information for everyone, my name is Martha Schickel. I'm not new to CTAC, but probably new to some of you in attending the meetings. I've been the director of Plan RVA, which is the host for the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization. I've been in that role since 2015 and have been in and out of the TPO side of our operations, but earlier this summer was appointed as the director of the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization, as well as the commission. So Miles Bushing, who I think many of you know is our Director of Transportation, is still the subject matter expert leading our transportation team for the agency. My role is really to be able to focus on governance and the interaction with the local government representatives, those of you that serve on this committee, as well as our partner organizations, and to guide the federal certification process and those types of things that we talk about regularly here. So it's great to meet all of you that I haven't met before, and look forward to being an active participant with you all in this committee work. One of the things that I've been working on since taking over in this new role is working on CTAC leadership. So when this committee met in July, we had a discussion about leadership, and we are in a situation where we're gaining new members, as you can tell from the introductions this morning, each meeting. But the structure of the CTAC is that the chair and vice chair roles must be filled by a local appointee, an appointee from a local government, from one of the 9 member jurisdiction governments. And we have guidance documents that are supplemental to our bylaws that provide information to us about how we go about selecting the chair and the vice chair, and it's by a recommended rotation. So we've been really fortunate in this last fiscal year to have Sarah Erickson from the city of Richmond serve as chair of this committee, and she's done a really phenomenal job in her leadership, but is ready to hand the gavel over in this new fiscal year. And when we looked at the rotation and I'll say the prevailing spirit from the TPO and our elected official public policy board body has been that rotation among jurisdictions is really important. And so we've talked with and consulted with Dr. Newbill, who chairs the TPO, who is responsible for appointing the chair and the vice chair in the event that the rotation can't be honored, and came up with a recommendation out of last meeting that Mr. Bunn, who is also a City of Richmond representative, was willing to serve in the chair role, and she has approved that, and she did, by virtue of a memo back to me, affirm appointment of Andrew Bunn as the chair of the CTAC. So that's why he's here today, not just as previously Sarah's alternate, but the appointed chair of the committee. So we wanted to give you that little bit of background. I hope that was clear as mud for everybody, but we are going to then continue to work to be able to populate those local government seats so that we can have that full rotation in effect. But I think we'll be continuing to talk about, and we're going to be talking with Mr. Martin, if I can be so bold, later this afternoon about whether or not he feels comfortable taking the vice chair role. I do not mean to put you on the spot, but want to be transparent with everybody that we're in that conversation, so we'll certainly update you as we move forward. Are there any questions that I could answer about CTAC leadership? I know for some of you it's your first meeting, so we can do maybe a little bit more of an in-depth orientation, but want to make sure that it's making sense where we're headed from a leadership perspective. Okay, so if it's all right, I'll move into the next item, which is directly related to Ms. Guthrie's suggestion. In addition to our 9 local government appointed seats on the CTAC, we have up to 12 at-large members that can be appointed from various stakeholder groups that we've identified that are crucial to the conversation around transportation in the region. And many of you are here today. I'm actually wondering if it might be beneficial to do a quick just round of intros so that we all can remember who's here and online and where we come from. Would that be okay?
I think that would be a great idea, especially since there's some meetings.
Okay. I know that your names were called during the roll, but would it be all right if we went around and just did a kind of quick intro, face to name introduction? Mr. Leonard, would you mind?
My name's John Leonard. I'm a professor of computer science at VCU. I've been involved in transportation for probably 35 years. I spent 23 years in Atlanta as a faculty member in civil and environmental engineering at Georgia Tech. I was on a team that helped build the Traffic Management Center for GDOT to run the Olympics in 1996, and have been involved in many planning opportunities with the Atlanta Regional Commission. I moved to Richmond about 8 years ago as a faculty member in computer science, and like to hang out with CTAC and keep my foot in transportation.
Good afternoon. I am Ernest Moore. I work with the Office of Equitable Transit and Mobility. I do the community engagement and advocacy. I've been with the office for a year and a half. Transportation is new, and I enjoy learning about it. I am bivocational and also a faith leader in the community.
I'm Herbert Richwan. I represent Chesterfield County as an alternate. I've been here for a long time. I'm always cold.
I am too.
Oh, yeah.
Freezing.
Well, I'm Phil Plymell, representing Chesterfield County, and I'm a retired civil engineer. I worked in California for the city of Palo Alto for my career, and moved the family out when I was able to retire young. I'm still young, and 16 years ago actually. So, and certainly I have a lot of projects in Palo Alto. You know, not only just resurfacing projects, but different kinds of projects. So, and knowing a couple of the supervisors, county supervisors, I said, this will be a good fit, I think. I can just get involved. So here I am.
Hi, my name is Sarah Wiziger, and I'm retired. I was a planner, but my last job was with VDOT. I was a Safe Routes to School coordinator for the state, but that was a long time ago. And I'm with the League of Women Voters, which is a regional group made up of members from all over the region.
I'm Michael Testerman, and I represent Virginians for High Speed Rail. Before that, I was the president of the Virginia Association of Railway Patrons, which was founded in the early 80s. And I've been sitting on CTAC since the 1980s. And I'm currently the executive director of the Virginia Rail Policy Institute. So my representation on here is sort of the voice for rail transportation, not just passenger trains, but getting trucks off the highways too.
I'm Lisa Guthrie. I've probably been on CTAC about 20 years. Not quite up in your caliber, but on your heels. So I have been executive director of several nonprofit organizations. The first with conservation and then with transit, with the Virginia Transit Association, and I retired from there a little over a year ago. So now I'm here just as a representative for Newkirk County.
I'm Upton Martin from the center of the universe, otherwise less formally called Ashland. Been on CTAC for a number of years, grew up in North Richmond, and I'm happy to be part of the transportation.
I'm Champ Burnley, and I'll start out by saying I'm a native Richmonder, born and raised here. I'm representing the Richmond Area Bicycling Association, which I was president about 15 years ago. I'm the former president of the Virginia Bicycling Federation. I was chairman of the Mayor's Bike, Ped, and Trails Commission back in 2010. But I'm a big transportation guy too. I walk, I ride bikes, I have motorcycles, cars. Love taking the train when I go to DC. So, I try to be holistic about my approach to looking at transportation. And same thing, I think I started on this body in 2002 or 3. So I'm looking at you, Michael. When you retire, I'm looking for your trophy.
Nobody's gonna get it from her.
Co-holders.
I'm Bill Walton. I've been an electrician for 45 years, retired in 2018. Took up machinist trade after that. Got a little small gun shop that I do work on guns. And me and my buddy invented a pistol round, which called a 357 ROF. So we're trying to market that. And I got into the transportation because Charles City definitely needs a lot of transportation upgrades.
Great, I'm sorry to make you introduce yourself twice. Let's make sure we hit the online folks. I can't see the screen very well. Oh, it's fine. There we go. Alex, is there anything else you wanted to add to your previous introduction, or you don't have to?
I just wanted to add, I'm quite just excited to be in the room with so many other people who have so much experience and stuff around transit and all that. And I'm very excited to get to meet you all once I get to actually go to a meeting the next time it happens.
Great. Going in order on the screen, Mr. Basham.
Did you say Bob? I'm barely hearing you guys.
I'm sorry, I was talking backwards, but yes, I was referring to you.
Okay. Hey, I'm Bob Basham. I live in Goochland now. I'm probably the second longest tenure behind Chesterfield there, but I was with Henrico with this committee before. Now I've been in Goochland for 18 years. I have my own business, and I've enjoyed working. A lot of people around this table, we've seen each other and worked together for a long time.
All right, and Mr. Root.
Good afternoon. I'm Don Root. I'm the alternate from Ashland. I left California after an almost 40-year career in public safety communications there, dealing with all sorts of things, including transportation. Moved to Ashland as a chance to explore the East Coast. And I do some work for the town in a part-time role. I work full-time for a public safety organization assisting Department of Homeland Security with a equipment evaluation program. And I've been on CTAC now. This will be my 3rd year.
Okay. And then for myself, I believe I'm on my 2nd year on CTAC. I am a civil engineer and I do transportation work for the state. If anybody's familiar with the Smart Scale program, I work with that. And I'm, I guess, also referring to what your initial introduction, I'm happy to be serving here as chair for the next year while we work out the rotation process further. So that brings us back around to you. Oh, unless Holly, you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, sure, yes. Hi. I'm Holly Gordon. I'm the Senior Community Engagement Manager here at Plan RVA. I just hit my 1-year anniversary a few weeks ago. So I'm excited to be here. Speaking of rail and bicycle, I took the Amtrak to DC 2 weeks ago for the DC bike ride, which is where they closed down all the streets in the city. We got to ride on 395, which was quite a surreal experience and was very cool. Amtrak could use a little help with instructing us how to actually get our bike on the train and where to put it, because they didn't know that so well. But otherwise, it was really great and easy to be able to take the train to DC.
Holly, I saw the Amtrak Bike Task Force. That will be relayed to them
Pass
directly.
that on, thank you, I love it, yeah. They didn't quite know what to do with us, it felt,
Yeah.
so.
They don't
like,
have racks on the locomotive?
they have them in the luggage car. We don't get to just throw it on the roof. Yeah, I was like, you could just put it on the roof. At this point, we just want to get on, so yeah.
Level board station.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
That brings us back around membership.
Yeah.
Dude, should we do Janice?
Oh,
Janice?
yes, I'm sorry, Janice.
That's all right.
I'm so sorry about
Who's
that.
chewing?
Yes. We kept you
I'm
down.
Janice Scott, the Board Relations Manager. For the new members, I will be in touch with some information for you, and for everyone else, I'm the person who emails you quite frequently.
Thank you very much. All right, I think that's everybody on the screen. Let me get the staff in the
Great.
back of the room.
Yeah, the other, just for everybody's benefit, the other people that are here in the audience are Plan RVA staff. Do you all wanna say your names quickly too? Just so we don't forget anybody. Sure.
Hi, my name is Sid. I'm the digital media specialist at Plan RVA.
So Gabriel, transportation planner here.
I'm Miles Bushing, Director of Transportation.
I'm Carrie, I'm transportation planner here.
I'm Barbara J. Cox, Director of Community Development. Kristen Hott, I'm brand new 2 weeks, I'm an engagement coordinator working with Holly.
Dorian Allen, transportation planner.
Thanks you all, appreciate that. So I think if it's okay with everybody, since I started on this track of membership, we'll skip to 6 and then we can come back to the original flow of the agenda, back to 2. But since it was brought up, I think one thing I'll say is that the common theme I heard from all of your introductions is that you care, and we're just so grateful for the fact that you do care and that you're willing to spend your time volunteering for your community in transportation, so thank you. To that end, we're looking for help to be able to identify others in the community who care to fill the empty seats on the board. So I think one of the follow-up items that we'll do to all members, whether you were able to be here today or not, is to send out a kind of an inventory of where we're still missing appointed seats and those organizations that we have identified to fill the 12 at-large spots and where we are with that. You mentioned Virginia Conservation Network and why it's overseas opportunity. And so we have been in contact and also got the same recommendation about the sort of the ability to think about PSG and VCN. And so to be quite candid, I'm just trying to think through like how do we do that in the parameters of that. And so there's agreement, I think, from the two organizations that would be a great way to be able to populate the seat. And so I hope we'll have an answer and we'll be able to introduce our new representative at the next meeting. So that's been an ongoing topic of email communication even heading into this week. So it's, yeah, you're
And you're doing the
clairvoyant.
same thing for NAACP and others where we haven't had any participation, contacting the chair or the director or whomever and
Yeah.
saying, you know, your presence is missed. We really
Yeah.
would like to have your involvement.
And I think, just to take a step back for a moment, one of the things that we're trying to do here at Plan RVA is, frankly, be more aware that people are being asked to do a lot these days. And so, what we've attempted to do over the last 2 months is really start to engage in conversations about just what you said. I mean, all of your involvement and all of these organizations' involvement in the process is really important. If sitting on a committee isn't the right fit, what is the right fit? And so we wanna try to have that one-on-one conversation. Ideally, it would be, you know, how do we get you back to the meetings? But if that's not the right fit, what do we need to do to make sure that these organizations and the groups, the people that these organizations represent are still part of the process? So, it'll be one of the things that we'll be talking about this afternoon, and thinking about what that outreach is. We're also keenly aware that conversation coming from staff isn't always as compelling as it might come from a peer member, and so we might be reaching out to some of you to help us with those conversations, to share your personal perspective about the value of what being on the committee is, and then also what you think the opportunities for those folks to contribute to this effort. So not a super substantive membership report, but that is kind of where we are in the staff thinking, and I think I wanted to just get feedback from you all about whether you think that that's hitting the right mark, or if there's another way that you all feel that we should be approaching that outreach to make sure that we get our membership back to where it was envisioned. So, feel free to talk to me or Holly about that offline if you have thoughts.
If you get a response that we just aren't in a position to have a representative at this time, like we added Office of Equitable Mobility a couple years back. We added RVA Rapid Transit, so some other organizations could be brought in for the, the at-large seats if, instead of just holding a position that's never filled. So we need to be more proactive.
Agreed, thank you. Thank you for that support.
Sure.
Appreciate that.
Any questions, then I think we will move back to the top of the agenda.
Item 2, approval of minutes.
All right, well then, I need to ask for a motion to approve the minutes, correct? All right, then I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting.
So moved.
All right, a second.
Second?
Great. No vote needed for that, correct?
No,
We're
I
good
think
to
you
go.
just indicate, if you're in favor, if you say.
Okay, yes, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Great. For agenda, I guess, would we want to retroactively move number 6 up to number 1?
As we just keep, I'll just note it in the
Okay,
minutes.
we'll just roll through it then. Any other consideration of amendments to the agenda from anybody? Seeing none, we'll move on to public comment. Is anybody here for public comment? We just introduced everybody in the room, so I don't think there's anybody in here not on the CTAC or the TPO or Plan RVA. So have we had any requests online?
We have not received any.
Okay, and we can move on from that to the chair's report. I basically was just planning to introduce myself, which I already did for anybody who hasn't met me yet, but all I wanted to say is that I'm happy to be filling in here while we I guess reassess our rotation and try to fill some seats for the next chair. I don't plan on being radically different from anything that Sarah was. I think that we're moving in a great direction with this committee, and I'd like to see us keep going in that direction. And I love to hear feedback and talk to people, so if you have any questions or comments or ideas outside of these meetings, you're more than welcome to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to talk about them with you and potentially bring them up in the following meeting. That's all I had to say about that. So committee membership we have discussed, and that brings us to number 7, which is also you.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. Our bylaws also call for the establishment of a CTAC Transportation Equity Work Group. It's intended to be a subcommittee that's focused on specifically the interests of our disadvantaged populations across the region and how we can bring voice, the opportunity for voice for those disadvantaged populations into the transportation planning process. We talked about this a little bit at the July meeting and asked just sort of for some thought and consideration. The bylaws, to be frank, are fairly open in how this committee could be formed. It's not terribly prescriptive in who it could be, and so I think what we are looking for from staff is some direction from you as CTAC members about how you think the intent of the formation of that committee could best be met. We threw out a couple of scenarios last month, and I was hoping that we might be able to get some consensus today on the direction to move forward. Choices, I think, and these aren't the only 3, but these are the 3 that came to mind for us, would be that equity work group could be a committee of the whole, given the effort that's occurred over the last 5 to 7 years in the development of the membership constitution for the CTAC. The thought is that that could actually be a group that's a committee of the whole that incorporates that focus into your regular every other month meetings. That's option 1 to be considered. The other could be that it might be beneficial to have a subgroup of this committee formed that we would convene separately from the CTAC regular meetings, and then that group could report back to the CTAC on the activities and where you think the priority and emphasis should be. And the third option would be that we form a group that's either a hybrid or outside of the membership of CTAC, which would mean bringing more people into the conversation with specific interest or expertise on thinking about the incorporation of disadvantaged communities' voice into the conversation. I think we're open to what you think makes the most sense. Again, kind of in the spirit of being conscious of everyone's busy and there's a lot going on in the community, and we fully recognize that this might not be the only thing that you have going on in your lives. So we're just interested in having a conversation, I think, today to get some direction about how to move forward. This feels really important. One, it was in the bylaws, and so incorporating it into the TPO's governance, we know was a priority for actually for Dr. Newble the last time she served as the chair of the TPO. But also as we kick off the long-range transportation plan process, which Holly will be talking about later in the agenda, we know that it's just really crucial to make sure that all voices are heard in the planning process. And so we want to make sure that we're intentional in assuring that this structure is in place as we embark on that significant planning effort. So again, those were the three options that we came up with internally of different avenues. I certainly am open to other suggestions or solutions, but we feel pretty strongly that we need to make sure that we are complying with the bylaws and assuring that focus on equity in disadvantaged communities.
Yes, a few years ago, we had another committee in addition to CTAC called EDAC, Elderly Disabled. And that was officially dismantled with the expectation that those views would be incorporated into CTAC. We really haven't done a good job of incorporating their concerns. And there were a number of people on that committee that were disappointed not to have a role or an official role. So I think maybe some exploration of those that provide that type of transportation, maybe again, reach out to AARP. You know, there's some other interests that are not on CTAC that would definitely provide some valuable input here that just went away after that EDAC was dismantled, and we haven't gotten that kind of involvement since then.
I definitely agree that there's a lot of I guess you would say intersections of equity that are not explicitly represented by this committee as far as like at-large members, part of organizations that are specifically representing those communities. So I do think that there would be value in bringing in outside members or people outside of CTAC. However, considering our difficulty in filling the slots that we have currently, I wonder if that would be better as a discussion of filling out our at-large members and then trying to fill those slots in a way that allows us to make a more effective equity subcommittee out of the members that we have represented here. Does that make sense, the way I described that? Any reactions to that idea?
I agree. I think we should fill this committee up with as many diverse voices as we can. And then if the workload becomes greater than we can handle at any given meeting, then it would make sense to spin off a subgroup or a subcommittee. But for now, let's get a bunch of voices around the table. There's a bunch of open chairs here.
Can I repeat what I think I'm hearing? So back to the membership conversation, we know we have some empty seats, and so there's an opportunity there to think intentionally about representation to bring more diversity and voice to the table, to this table. And that, I think, back to your suggestion, you know, if the timing isn't right for representation of the organizations that we've currently got on the roster for those at-large seats, there might be some opportunity to bring even voices in through that direction. So it feels like step one, fill vacancies. Step two, figure out if those vacancies persist, how do we move some different seats into the organization, and then come back to determine whether or not, based on that complete set of membership here, the workload suggests that there needs to be a breaking off of a separate group, or if it happens in this setting.
Things could happen concurrently. Doesn't have to be exhaust this first and then go to this. I think touching base with those people that were involved They might be willing to serve on a short-term advisory panel without committing to being on CTAC. So unless you have a conversation with them to see what their level of interest is, you really don't know.
That's
And you
helpful.
might need something short-term for the long-range plan without somebody committing to being on CTAC on an ongoing basis. So
That's helpful, thank you. So we could have that conversation about how we could plug in a variety of different ways. As a subgroup, part of the CTAC, part of the long-range transportation plan is more of a project. So we've got options to engage people depending on what
depending on what their interest
where they
and
are.
level of engagement might be.
Yeah.
I wonder if it might be useful to kind of have a placeholder on our agendas for ensuring that we bring that conversation back each time. Not necessarily about membership, but just this is a value of this committee, this is a value of this organization, and therefore should influence all of our work. And then maybe it kind of helps us remind ourselves to check in on it so that it is a stated part of our ongoing work. That feels like an easy yes, that it is influencing all of our work, and let's name it and work on it.
But unless you initiate contact with them, we're just still just talking to
Yes,
ourselves.
yes, yeah.
But if we're going to start this as a committee of the whole and then see where it goes from there,
Yeah.
I think the bare minimum would to make it a standard agenda item. Like we all take our CTAC hats off, put our equity subcommittee hats on for one agenda item and say, what are we doing about this?
Yeah.
If nothing, we take our hats back off and put the CTAC hat back on, but at least we brought it up and established how we're moving forward towards it. Sounds like a good starting place to me. Does anybody else have feelings or thoughts about that? It's a standing agenda item.
And if I understand the standing agenda item, maybe is twofold. There's a focus on membership, but there's also a focus on making sure that the principles around equity and representation of disadvantaged communities is part of the process.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And like you said, if, you know, in 2 or 3 meetings, we've filled out most of our, or all of our at-large members, and we feel that there's additional work that subcommittee could be doing to help inform the committee, maybe we spin it off into some group that meets in between, or a group that brings in an outside member to talk or something like that. But something we can address after we fill our at-large members.
I will endeavor to have those conversations over the next, before the next meeting of the CTAC in November, so that we can come back with kind of a understanding of where our current identified individuals or organizations are and what their desire is, and then we can come back to you with requests for direction for next steps. Great, thank you all, appreciate that.
We'll move forward to new business, which is Holly Gordon Public Engagement Plan.
Right, so linked in your agendas that you've got ahead of time, and Sid, I think, is going to pull this up so that we can look at it, is our annual report of what we said we were going to measure in our public engagement plan and how we did. And so this is my first time tackling this annual report because it's my first time being able to report on some numbers. And some of this was for work that happened before I got here. But essentially, our public engagement plan is the general kind of high-level structure for the types of engagement we want to do at the TPO, at the Transportation Planning Organization. And what did we say was important for us to measure? And so what the annual report is just simply an accounting of that in short form of the numbers. And so this is a little bit of kind of how we did. As we do this and as I've kind of gotten more time here, I think I'm identifying, and I think some of the CTAC subcommittee that helped me work on how can we improve our public engagement plan each time, we're realizing, hey, some of these things maybe aren't the best things to measure. Like, why are we measuring that? Or we don't really have a plan to do that, so maybe we should stop saying we're going to measure it. So the beauty of a document like this is that it's in continuous improvement, and we have the opportunity to look at it and kind of evaluate how we're doing. I'm also trying to think about kind of our general capacity for, I love data, right? I know there's a lot of data people in here, but let's not say we're gonna collect it unless we have a plan to collect it or how we're gonna use it. And let's also be reasonable about what's possible given the scope of who we are and what we're doing. So this kind of touches on just general types of engagements. Like we said, we were going to reach a certain number of underserved populations. what kind of media have we gotten? What is the general feel for how we're getting out into the community and communicating our message? And so this is both numbers, but also a little bit of clips of, here is a snapshot of some of the press we've gotten. It's not every indicator of the press we've gotten. A little bit of great progress on social media. Sid has been doing great work on starting to analyze our analytics better so that we know that the work of spreading the message is actually doing well. A couple of good call outs in the social media section is that I will tell you that LinkedIn is probably our most successful tool. As anyone who follows social media trends knows, gosh, the algorithm is hard to feed consistently, right? And the algorithm is constantly changing on all of the platforms. And so Facebook is actually not a thing that we're doing very well on, but it's also a tool that tends to be, I think, more sunsetting its time in the social media landscape. We added Instagram as a new tool January of this year, so we're only 9 months in of doing it. And this report is from the last fiscal year, so it was July of the year before to June of this year. So that was only a handful of months of Instagram performance, and it was really like wildly successful for how short we've had it. And if any of you were following any of the press or the social media around the Mayo Bridge public comment hearing that was held here last night, I think our ability to be visible and easily tagged on social media was a benefit. We were not involved with that process. We were just simply the space host. We care about transportation, but it wasn't our project. But we got lots of great people in the building and a lot of really positive press about the fact that we are a regional convener based on simply hosting that event. So for me, that's the power of our communication channels, to even just be a good regional convener and host people who are doing good work. So,
Is this the first year that this report has been produced?
No, it has been done, as far as I know, for a while before I got here. It's required to do an annual
Have any
update.
comparisons of how these figures compare to previous years?
I do, but we changed some of the measurement for good reason. I also think, and I might lean on the other staff who've been here longer than me to say that I think we have not measured it this way for very long. And I defer to the other staff who've been here longer than me, is I think this was really the first time we actually put these measures in 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
I think we could follow up with the members to share what we were measuring and the pieces that do relate,
Yeah.
that we could compare over time.
Yeah.
That'd be a good benchmark to
Yeah.
be able to see whether we're making ground or not.
And I will say transparently, we weren't always saying we were gonna measure the right thing. And so that is where it's hard to benchmark if you don't keep it consistent. But some of the things transparently needed to be changed because they weren't good measures. And so that's where like a year over year doesn't always work. And so I think we're figuring out, oh gosh, no, we should be tracking this instead. So that's our next endeavor for this next fiscal year, is to figure out what really does matter. Because just the number is not alone enough of the story, right? Quantitative and qualitative measures together go well. But I'll tell you that even just looking at last year, Mr. Martin, the numbers are not very different from each other. But it feels like positive progress if incremental.
I know I will say that the movement to Instagram has made Planner VA much more visible to me and my community.
Great.
I see my friends who are not particularly involved in transportation stuff reposting Planner VA things, especially around the Mayo Bridge. That was a really big one. Just people in my neighborhood who I follow on Instagram, I see it pop up on their stories.
Great.
So that is, I have noticed that in my own life outside of
Great.
CTAC.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And anyone else who's a especially lover of data and would love to, kind of chat about, this is again, your role as advisors. If you're like, hey, we've seen this kind of data being tracked in other places and you feel like that's something we should be paying attention to, I'm definitely open to hearing that. So I appreciate that. Any other questions on the annual report? Okay, thank you, Sid.
In that case, I'll pass it over to you.
Moving on to business item 2. So I think I alluded to this last time we were together, and apologies. I feel like we're talking about so many engagement plans, I can't remember who I've told what. But this is an active engagement that we're doing about rural public transportation in the 5 more rural counties: Hanover, Charles City, Powhatan, New Kent, and Goochland. And so I'm so excited that many of you representing those counties are here today, including Charles City. So this is a kind of a sub-study that we're doing about what are the needs for public transportation in the rural counties, because we know that there's not a standard bus line like we're used to in the city, but there are some kind of more creative ways to do transportation that have popped up around the region. And so what this is from essentially August to October is us going to the counties, and our transportation planner who's managing this is already looking at what is the data that exists already? What are the localities telling us that their needs are? So we know that that exists, but then also doing a separate chance to offer to the public, please tell us how you're getting around. What do you need? What are the things you're trying to get to and why? To just get another feel for what does the individual human need as it relates to transportation. And so the beauty of our role as regional convener is that we get to get all this data in one place, right? If Goochland is just working on it in Goochland and Charles City is just working on it there, we're trying to hopefully take all of that and bring it up a level so that we can look at what a regional plan looks like. And so the good news is, I know many of you are already doing this work, and we are mining that information and getting that input. We've also extended engagements to a lot of the nonprofits and community organizations that serve folks who often are transportation dependent and maybe lacking in transportation options. And so we're getting both their kind of aggregate feedback, but also trying to share it with individuals. So our task to you is, if you have not already shared about this, please do. And so we created this toolkit that was linked in the agenda that Sid has pulled up, which is what you all have asked from us before, which is what are some sample talking points I can say about this? What are 2 sentences I can share with my Facebook friends or my house of worship or the next community meeting I'm going to say, hey, I'm on this great committee and there's a need right now for input about this thing I care about. Here's how you can help. And so the major ways are share our survey, and that's what that engage.planrva.org website is. It's about 6 questions asking people how they get around and what they'd like to see. And then printing flyers or images and sharing at your places, right? Is there a library that would like to see this? Is there a place that you frequent that you want to make sure sees this? You're helping us get the word out, right? You are expanding our reach by getting to all the people in the region. Kristen, our new staff it was her literal first day of work. We went to a squirrels game and we were talking about this, and I think people were really excited to give us input, even if they didn't live or work in these counties, if they traveled through, to be able to share. Again, we're a region. Even if you don't live or work in that place, you might care about or travel to it and kind of help connect the dots for people that it's all related. So from now until October, your homework, if you choose your quest, if you choose to accept it, is to help us spread the word on this. I have paper copies as well. I gave everybody at least one, but if you'd like to take some more of the flyer with the QR code to the survey on it, you can take that. But you can also print it right from that toolkit that was linked in the agenda.
Holly, do you have a screenshot of the toolkit?
It's linked in the agenda. When you say screenshot, he was just sharing it. Do you want to see it again?
Yeah.
Yeah, so can you bring that back up, the toolkit?
Holly,
Yeah.
this is Bob Basham, Goochland County.
Hello.
That which you were talking about that you're handing out there, could you have someone scan and send it to us that are on the
Yeah, it's
virtual?
actually, absolutely. So in that toolkit that Sid is sharing right now, the link in your agenda to this meeting actually links right to it. And if you click on the word that says flyer, that's what this is. So that flyer, you can download, you can print. And if we, I don't know if it's useful to like send it out again afterwards, we can do that, but it's in your agenda page. I know you might not have that handy right now. Does that answer your question, Mr. Basham?
Yes, I was just looking to see that page.
Yep. It's actually the name of new business B number 2. The title is linked, and it says linked next to it.
But the URL is down here in the bottom left, I believe.
That's the URL to the actual engagement survey.
Okay.
This
not the
flyer,
toolkit.
yeah,
Okay.
the flyer itself is actually on the toolkit here. Because some people might want to download a flyer, others might just want to save a picture and share it in email. Yeah. So we're giving you lots of choices.
I have a question.
Yes.
And maybe it's been discussed in previous meetings, but how are the 5 communities chosen, or how did they get on that list? And of course, I'm looking at it as, Chesterfield definitely has some
Yeah.
things that need some work on. And not having Chesterfield, especially with all the development of seniors, of 55 plus building, there's sort of a pending need for this kind of access.
Yeah.
So, and again, especially 55 plus and people who can't actually drive. So that's because of their health or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
How did we get there?
Yeah.
I'm gonna defer to Miles on that because I assume it's related to funding, but I'm gonna let Miles tell us.
Sure, I can address that. So this is actually a study that was directed by the policy board. So at the MPO level, the policy board told us to study the rural areas and specifically was looking at New Kent, Charles City, Hanover, Richland, Powhatan, and then looking at how to provide sustainable and fiscally constrained public transportation. So it's identifying the needs. And really where this all came from is GRTC's been piloting micro-transit zones around the region. And so as part of that study, there was a desire in Powhatan and New Kent for broader service to cover more of the county than what the micro-transit zones would have allowed. So this is an opportunity for us to dive deeper into that and see what options exist to provide that service.
Hey, Miles, not to rat hole on that, but to Phil's point, you know, I don't really think of Chesterfield being rural, although you get out to Mosley and there's some places that certainly are, just like Chesterfield. When I think of Short Pump, I'm not thinking rural. However, if I'm out in Verina and east of there is rural, did you use a metric or, you know, was it just kind of, well, this is or not gut feel, or did you have some density measurements, or is there a metric you used to
So we were
determine what
looking at the urbanized area of the region. So the 5 counties that are covered in this study are primarily outside of the urbanized area, Henrico, and even like on the Verina side, and most of Chesterfield, other than the very, very, far western southern edge, are also in the urbanized area. So that's really what drove it, is the urban-rural boundary based on census designations.
I don't think that this is intended to be the final effort. I think that this is a step in the direction of looking at what a more comprehensive transit system looks like across the region. So it's the existing GRTC network, the micro transit zones, this rural study, and then where are the gaps in between. So I feel like this is a step on the policy board's perspective of really having that discussion about what real regional transit looks like, as opposed to an endpoint in the process.
Just if I can add one last thing, to Martha's point, we had the greater RVA transit vision plan, so that lays out the vision for public transportation in our region. And one of the recommendations was to look at Bay Transit as a model for service in the rural areas. So this is sort of fulfilling that as one of the recommendations that came out of that vision plan as well. So it's follow up on our regional public transportation vision.
All right, you good with that, Phil, or? So I know where you're coming from with your question, but
I'm getting sick and tired of Chesterfield being left out of everything. I really am. I think it's high time Chesterfield being a part of something.
I just asked Holly, I think, to your point, the question about the parts of Chesterfield that are not currently served and the members of the community that have needs. I don't think that there's anything in the survey that would preclude that input. The instructions we were given were to do the outreach in these designated rural communities, but there would be no harm in input coming in that speaks to unserved portions of Chesterfield.
So you can say, I live or work in another county, and then still answer the questions, and then there's an open feedback that is where you could indicate, we would love to see something similar in our area.
And I just also add that Chesterfield, Henrico, and Richmond were part of scoping this whole study. So this was all scoped through the TAC. So the Technical Advisory Committee, which is the engineers and planners from all of the localities, helped to develop this scope. So this was done with input from everyone. So we're not intentionally trying to exclude anyone on that.
And there's no GRTC service in any of these localities currently.
Where it is, it's very limited, that's correct.
Well, if you count Link as being part of GRTC, in certain communities like Ashland, we have the link all around Ashland.
Yeah.
It looks like it's being very, very well used. But that's very, very, recent that that's happened.
That's not GRTC.
I think is,
It
yeah.
is, okay.
Yeah.
I think what they were saying is that the desire for the survey comes from the success of the microtransit. It seems like people have enjoyed it so much that they wanted to expand.
There's been good coverage, yeah.
Or concurrent.
This study was ordered before most of the microtransit zones launched, but knowing that those were coming and recognizing that there were still areas that weren't gonna be covered in those zones. So yeah, I mean, I do think that the energy layered on top of each other is driving a lot of the conversation.
Yeah. And like Miles said, this will not be the only chance for us to talk about this because we are also about to launch a long-range transportation plan, which this will be a piece of that as well. So if it feels okay to the group, I would love to tell you about what the engagement strategies look like for that. Does that seem okay?
I have
Oh.
one on this.
Sure.
Is that certainly being part of these studies, usually there's funding involved and grants and all that. You know, we just, you know, we can put all the input, you know, on trying to get some funding to fund Midlothian Turnpike and Route 1 and all these other areas. You know, being part of a study like this usually translates into funding. So that's the reason why we don't want to be out of that loop.
Sure.
I think one takeaway that I have is, I think we could sit down with our Chesterfield staff members and ask them how we could take this input and either promote participation in the survey in this effort, or what is the Chesterfield response to the concerns that they're not, you know, a part of enough of the transit conversation. I think we can commit to doing that on the staff level to inquire about that, if that feels like a good next step.
That's great.
Yeah, again, Chesterfield's the largest county, and also larger than Richmond as far as population, Richmond City. So to not have a clearly or a clear idea of what kind of development's going on, you know, how we're beginning to have centers of, and again, I repeat, 55 plus people, that it becomes very, it becomes a stronger need.
I do think I understand what you're saying. I do wanna repeat what Miles said, that this study, just to be clear, was not something originated by staff at Plan RVA. This came from the jurisdictions, and the discussion at the policy board was directed to us. So I would like to relay back the feedback that we're getting today to the Chesterfield delegation, but in essence, this project came from Chesterfield as a major stakeholder in the discussion. So I do wanna make clear that we're following the direction of them, not the other way around. But I will make sure that we relay the feedback back so that we're not missing parts of the community in the process.
Based on your background and having worked in Palo Alto in this business, the TAC group parallel to this group is where all the engineers and planners hang out, who are much familiar with the funding and how to convert plans into projects. And less of that happens here, which is why you may be noticing some of those connections missing. That it's the TAC where the rubber meets the road and the engineers and planners get together and say, well, now that we have these data, we can go out and get some federal money to actually do something.
And prioritize projects.
The whole thing flows at the TAC level, really.
If I could interject here, there's somebody online who has had their hand raised, and I want to make sure that they also get a chance to weigh in. Mr. Weeb, I think it is.
Anymore.
No.
Oh, hey,
He was
Yeah.
just moved over.
okay, great.
Should be on there.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, yeah, so I guess I just wanted to say, joining in, I mean, I don't know if we want to dive into the Chesterfield conversation even more, or if we just get to our future transportation plan. But, I mean, I hear that need for, the transitability for these older, 55 plus communities and stuff like that. And like maybe we can consider pedestrian or, bike facilities that would make transportation for those people, enjoyable and also, just more possible in their areas. Because I know some of those areas in Chesterfield are very car centric. That's my comment.
And he was not here for the introductions, but Michael Weeb is the alternate for Henrico County, just so everybody has that context. I do think we're kind of moving away from the rural transportation survey at this point. If we want to come back to this at the end of the meeting, I believe we have a place on the agenda for that. So I think this would be a good point to put a pin in this conversation if we want to return to it, but we've certainly heard from the Chesterfield representatives that we want some more context on how the scope of this survey was decided and what the boundaries of rural are for the purposes of this survey. So if we want to return to it later, we definitely can, but for now, let's move to the LRTT discussion.
Excellent, thank you. So, and again, this is the next chance for all of these wonderful thoughts and comments to be shared, because the long-range transportation plan, as Miles presented, I think at our last meeting, is the plan that we do every 5 years for the TPO for the transportation needs of the region for the 20+ year horizon. And so we are about to embark on our 2-year plan to do that. And so what that means for this committee, because all we're asking you to give feedback on today is what is the high-level engagement strategies that we want to use to get public input on this massive project. And so all these things that you all care about individually, absolutely, there will be places for you to share that about public transit and bicycling and pedestrian safety and everything you could think about. That is the purpose of the LRTP, is to get a comprehensive universe of projects to meet all of the needs that exist in this region. So what we are tasked with as CTAC is, my job is to bring to you an overview of an engagement strategy of how we will get public input for the next 2 years. And so the document you have that looks like this, that is also shared online, is the high-level overview. Now, there is a lot here, so I want to hit some high points for you, because what your goal today is to say, does this feel generally correct? So that we may pass it along to the advisory work group for the long-range transportation plan, which is a group that is underneath the TPO, to say, hey, as our community transportation advisory committee, and our job is to advise on engagement strategy, these feel like directionally the right direction. And so that doesn't mean that we're gonna get down to at what day are we doing this thing at this time, but it is the general direction. And so we're gonna be building out those very specific goals and directives as we move on. But today what we're doing is saying, does this feel directionally correct? And so a shout out to Kristen, who in her 2 weeks here has helped us design this beautiful piece and was helping put together the structure to make this a little bit more readable. That is a challenge I think Plan RVA always has, is, as you know, many of you have worked in this world a long time, there is so much happening, and being able to be clear to the public about what we're doing and where their chance to be involved is really important. And so I want to tell you kind of directionally, this first page is indicating in the LRTP, in 2 years, what are the stages in which we will look for public input and share it back to the community. So that's what these stages are. And they mimic the stages in the long-range transportation plan where there is places for input. The breakdown of what happens in each of these stages is on this grid on your very last page. So if you turn to the very last grid, 1 and 2 is the timeline and tools overview. And so what this shows you is in more detail for each of those sections, what is the phase? What's the rough timeline of that phase? What's the type of engagement? And then what is the tool that we're going to use broadly? And I know this is quite a lot to be getting right now, but this is essentially mimics a lot of what we've done in the past because the concepts of engagement are not very different year after year when we're talking about transportation. But where I think we get a chance to be really innovative and pay attention to equity is in the how and in the reach of groups like this to get out to the world, to talk to the people who don't always get asked these questions. So before we jump into the timeline here, just now that I've kind of given you an overview of what this is, I do want to point out what feel like two important pieces of the kind of text of the document, which is on page 3 in the pink section where it says intentional feedback loop design. And Sid, if you can bring that back up to show the 4-pager. The intentional feedback loop design is something that we're going to do differently this time. I think Martha referenced this a little bit as we have become even more advanced as Plan RVA with all of the plans and products that we have going on, we are often going back to the same kinds of stakeholders to ask similar questions because these are the people that have footholds in communities, they represent communities, they care about communities, and they are able to spread the word to our region of 1.5 million people. And we are realizing that, gosh, we're asking the same kind of groups, the same kind of questions over and over. So how can we be a little bit more intentional about regularly communicating with these groups and getting ahead of it so that it's not just, oh gosh, suddenly we have a question, but let's plan to revisit these groups 3 times over the next 2 years. And so that's what this pink section is indicating. We've got this massive spreadsheet of community groups and leaders who we have been working with intentionally for the last handful of years to say, here's the thing we're doing. We would love to come to you 3 times over the next 2 years to get input from the communities that matter to you and to share back how your input was used. And so conceptually, that's not different from how we've done it, but this intentional returning 3 times is. And so the goal is that we're gonna do some outreach to say, here's the schedule, here's what we'd like to do. Does this sound good to you? Is this the rough way that we can get involved? And if not, do you have a better suggestion? But it's inviting them from step 1 to be a part of the whole process so that they are intentional partners with us through the whole thing. I'm gonna pause just to see if anybody has any questions on kind of that stakeholder engagement.
So can you cite an example? So like, who were these traditional groups that we've gone to?
Sure.
So I'm just trying to visualize.
Yes. So I'm thinking,
how it might play
if
out.
we think about the business community, who are the organizations that represent the interests of the business community in each locality? Often that's chambers, New Kent Chamber, Chamber RVA, the LGBTQ Chamber. So knowing that we've got, here's an organizational touch point, they reach a whole lot of people. So let's ask the heads of those organizations, hey, you're gonna help us potentially reach the business community. Are you the right people for us to meet with? An example might be in over 55 population. Who are the organizations that serve or are working with or are made up of an over 55 population? Senior Connections, AARP, some of the maybe healthcare facilities. Who are already talking to these groups to say, hey, you've got an audience. We would love to make sure that your audience feels heard. Is that helping kind of eliminate groups? So I've got a massive list going of who I think these are, but your input is welcome to say, Holly, do we have all the right groups? So if you are thinking right now, remember that who's in your community exercise we did a couple times? That's where I want you to make sure you share. Ooh, let's make sure Plan RV knows that in Charles City, these are the right people we should be talking to. Now that's obviously a massive list. And so what we're trying to get a little bit of better feet under us, I think, as Plan RVA is to say, we can't possibly talk to 1.5 million individual humans. But what we can do is lean on our locality relationships and our organizational partners who we can ask for, let's make sure that we're spreading the word through you to your people.
If I could ask,
Yeah.
this reminds me of one of the first things you brought to us as a committee when we were talking about I think it was called the Public Engagement Plan, where we were basically planning our planning. And I'm wondering if those two things are connected in some way, or if what we did, the work that we did then informed
Yes.
this?
The work we
one.
did that
Okay.
informed this, yes, because that was high level. And this is now the next level down, which is for this product, the long range transportation plan, what's a strategy we can use? Now, I'll tell you, we're gonna use a strategy for a lot of our other work too, because we think it's a way for us to talk to these communities regularly about work outside of transportation, right? Because Plan RVA does other things too. So the benefit is that we are starting to have this comprehensive approach to, we know that we often have to ask the same kind of groups to give us input about what makes the region healthy. But let's do it in a more strategic way so it doesn't feel like, well, I already told you that 6 months ago. So that it's a kind of a continuous feedback loop to ensure that people know that their input is being heard.
So in some ways, this is already coming from actions that this committee has taken. So I think one lens to look at it through is whether we feel like this is representative of the values of this committee and what the approach we were taking when we were talking about the plan last year. Now that we're seeing something that came out of that, do we feel like we like this? And if we do, I think we did a good job last year. And if we don't, then maybe we want to return to that at some point in the near future and see if we want to tweak it or something like that. Or at least identify what we don't like about it.
Yeah.
Holly, you indicated that you're right far into identifying the organizations in each of the jurisdictions, is that correct?
Yes, we have, basically from many things we've done, even just that I've touched in the last year, we have some idea of people we regularly talk to, but it's not finished, is what I would say, yeah.
Is that list available to us in that are, like, could I go someplace and see what organizations have been identified as contact places for Ashland?
It probably doesn't. I'm trying to figure out, and help me figure out, staff and committee, what's the best way to do that without it being like, you're not gonna look at a massive spreadsheet of, 10,000 people, and also privacy concerns of that is, what is the best way for us to, you tell me what's missing versus, I don't know, help me think that through.
I'd like to see that for Charles City also.
Yeah.
Because I don't think a lot of that exists in Charles City.
Right, yeah, right, and each county is gonna be a little different, sure. So I'll tell you that it isn't, maybe making it sound more finished than it is. Right now, it's about 6 different spreadsheets that are being used for different things.
Do you have them, do you have their addresses or?
No, it's usually just name and an organization. So who's the organization, where is it, and then who is a contact we either know or wanna know, yeah. It's not, it's not a directory.
It would be helpful for me if we're looking at what are the most effective organizations in Ashland that we could contact and have a one-on-one meeting with to talk about the long-range plan or any transportation needs or whatever. It would be helpful for me to know who you've already contacted, how that contact took place, if you felt that there was value in the input that you'd already gotten, because I don't want to go to an organization, one, that you're already working, and two, I want to make sure that I can identify the organizations that I think my experience is that are most representative of our community, but not have to go through the whole, all the massive numbers that you've gone through.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you that one point is I want to know who you're already working so we don't bother them again. People need to be bothered again. And that is a thing I have learned very strongly in the last year, is that even when people are interested, they're busy and they need to hear a message multiple times. So there have even been partners of ours that are like, why didn't you tell us about this? And we say, well, we did, but they have other things that are happening and our work is just one part of their work. So there is a benefit to hearing the same message from other people who care about it. So that's okay to say, hey, I care about this, did you know? And in fact, that's a really useful thing. I might suggest that to answer your question of like, what's the list, is I think it might be helpful to say, think back to that who's in your community activity that you did, and we can share that back to you if you don't have that, and say, I want you to tell me who the people are that we must know. That way you don't need to look through, like there's no reason you're gonna look through 12,000 contacts. And if you're saying, Mr. Walton says, hey, here are the 3 people in Charles City that I think you should talk to, you just tell me that, and then I can make sure that it gets in our list. I'm not asking you, Mr. Martin, to go through and identify who do you need to talk to and what are you taking? We're not there yet, right? Like, I'm not giving you any instruction to have to do anything other than, let's make sure we're talking to the right people.
I think it may be useful if, it sounds like you have name and organization. If you threw the names out and just made a list of organizations and counties.
Yeah.
Because I think that would be a much smaller list to digest, and at a high level, we could then begin to see the shape of what we'll identify much larger groups of constituents that we're missing.
Okay.
And then begin to think organizations, then drill to the next level, which may be the people in that. But at the high level, just to have organizations. And then from a real data sciencey way, if you could do a little heat map by jurisdiction of how many organizations are in each county, we'd immediately see which counties are overrepresented and underrepresented with respect to organizations that we reach out to.
Okay, that's helpful. And from a data perspective, I don't want us to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Like ultimately what we're trying to get at is getting to the people. So even if we don't have a perfect system built for how to do that, ultimately we're communicating where we want to communicate. And so yes, I would definitely lean on your perspectives as data scientists to help us work that out. So I want to move on just from that for a minute because I want to point out another important piece of this plan, which is the purple section that's on page 4. And we alluded to this already with the rural plan, which is, hey, we're already looking at all the good data in the locality plans from all the previous comp plans that are happening, right? It's our job as the regional convener to look at the data that already exists and the public input that was already given. So that is another way that, again, we can't speak to every individual person, but we, as the regional convener whose job it is to serve the localities, is we are looking at those locality plans and saying, what are the trends? What are we noticing? What are projects that felt important? And figuring out how they fit into our regional plan. That also means it's an opportunity for if a person says, well, I told the city I cared about that a year ago, how come that's not here? We can say, we heard you, we looked at that, thank you, and here's how we're using it. But then we're also giving people another opportunity to raise their hand and say, well, I care about this now. Or I didn't get to say it last time, and I want to say it to the regional convener too, because sometimes you have to say the message a couple times to get it included in the work. And as we know, government moves slowly sometimes, and things cost money. And so the benefit is we're saying, we're going to give you another chance to say that it's important to you, and that here's the plan of how maybe we couldn't get to it then, but we might be able to get to it now. I think we could do as an organization a little bit of better job of sharing back, here's what happened once you told us this. Because I think we know, but sometimes we don't always tell the public that.
Do you ever go to outside organizations for funding?
Can you
Yes.
be more specific? I was like, yes, but I was like, what do you mean?
Well, the Union Sportsman Alliance is an organization that we support at Local 666.
Okay.
And the money that they generated off of the first dinner that we had there, they put pathways or asphalt pathways down through York River State Park for handicapped people to be able to go through the state park. And somebody will push them or whatever to get wheelchair accessibility to the York River State Park.
Okay.
And I didn't know if y'all would go to something like that to see if you could get some funding.
So the funding question is probably a bigger, more complicated answer than I feel qualified to say, because there are so many streams. And so staff in the room, help me figure out how to say, where does local funding like that fit into our big picture, or does it not? Because it's really not ours to do. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, the CVTA has money, and a part of that money that the CVTA has is required to be funneled back to the community for them to use for needs, transportation needs within their community. Now, I don't know the dollar amount, of course, Chet's not here.
It's 50, I mean, it's 50% of the
Miles,
revenue.
Miles, can you address that? Sir?
It's 50% of the revenue.
Yeah, but
So,
we're talking like 1.2 billion these days.
yeah, I mean,
mean,
it's
it's-
dependent, of course, upon the
This all comes from the
jurisdiction,
federal
but
government. This
I
is
guess
big transportation.
I was trying to think, so to your
I
point,
figured
yeah.
a lot of it came from that, but.
Yeah.
Oh, but I think,
That's not federal money.
That's trails
local-
with DCR,
that's
yeah.
local
We'll
taxes
talk.
money, isn't it?
I think, our domain typically is in seeking public funds. So grant funding from federal, state funding programs. example you gave, I think, is interesting though, because if this committee can help mine for new funding streams that could help with last mile or, additional amenities to infrastructure, that kind of a thing, then that could help push a project over, to really move into a fundable situation. So I'm gonna presume, but we never wanna do that, the county already knows about that relationship and that investment, but I mean, that's, I think, something more that we put in our Rolodex of conversations that we have with Charles City County staff to make sure that they're thinking about that as a resource when they're trying to assemble funding for a project. We would not go after an application from that particular source because I don't think that they probably would fund the type of work that we do. But we always are looking for opportunities to connect our local governments with new funding streams. Because we all kind of know the smart scale process and the federal government and the CVT, I mean, they know those avenues. And there's not enough money to fund what we need to do.
I can speak.
I don't know if that's answering your question, or if it's more along the lines of CDTA.
Just a point of information there, and trust me, I mean, I've been doing this 20 years and sometimes my head spins with how all this federal funding works. We've got a lot of new people now, we're getting a bunch. I would encourage staff to put together kind of an executive overview for new CTAC members to explain how things like smart scale, how things like transportation or TA funding works, because this funding mechanism is very, very complex and the numbers are mind-bogglingly large. So we might want to think about that.
That would be a good idea, yes.
I can speak to it generally from a statewide perspective because I work with state transportation funding. It generally, in Virginia, it is not unusual for private or nonprofit funding, whether it's proffers, whether it's nonprofit funding like you said, to be channeled through localities into more official transportation projects pre-identified through comp plans or LRTPs or things like that. But those would be managed by the locality and then reported through or brought through to any regional efforts. So I'm thinking in terms of NOVA right now, but it's not unusual for a NOVA regional project like a trail to have funding leveraged from a private or nonprofit source by channeling it through the locality. So in your specific case, I think technically the process would be for the local 666, you said, to sort of work with the locality to make sure they know that that funding is available or could be made available. And then the locality would say, okay, well, we have this trail project that we want to do. Let's talk to this nonprofit and see if they want to raise funding for it. We can leverage that funding or just get that project done that way. And then if that project has been identified in the LRTP or at the regional level, I think that would be seen more as like, we've checked that box.
But in that case, it's York River State Park would be DCR, so the locality would have no control of that. You got like Pocahontas and Embud, they've spent tens of thousands of dollars building trails out there. That's really not under our auspices as CTAC.
Right.
Yeah.
We have in previous years had an overview of transportation funding. What's federal, what's state, what's CDTA, et cetera. And so if that could be updated and shared with new members, I think it would probably be very helpful. I mean, as far as I know, it already exists. We just need to, have that more or less as a overview available for new members.
Well, and I think, Miles, I'm kind of looking at you, but I mean, I agree. I think we can put content together that would help anybody try to, better
Particularly
navigate
new members. Yeah.
difficult to navigate waters.
Yeah.
Miles, do you agree?
Yeah, we have some raisable funding sources already in different planning documents, so we can put it together into a one-pager.
Well, and luckily, this group doesn't have to make those decisions is the good news, right? We're tasked with how do we ensure that the word and the engagement gets out, and so obviously understanding the backbone is important,
Well,
but
with LRTP,
we don't have to.
prioritizing it, so.
Well, this committee is not prioritizing funding, right?
Well, but if we got representation on LRTP, we're sure we have a hand on the wheel of the ship.
I guess so.
Yeah, I mean, this is part of the stacked engagement, so it's, it's important to understand where all the resources come from and what the limitations are so that we're making good advice to the people who make the decisions. Absolutely.
I just didn't want folks to feel overwhelmed that they had to understand every funding structure in order for us to spread the good word, right? Because we're here to spread the importance of the word of engagement of transportation, yes? So, thank you for that really good discussion about new opportunities, where do we put things, getting folks on board. Any other thoughts on this engagement strategy? So again, this is high level. What we're saying is this is the rough tool that we want to use for this. If you see any like typos or things like that, I'm happy to hear them. I know this is not a final draft. Yeah.
Holly, I think it would be interesting to put another one-pager together
Okay.
that showed how the 2045 plan was used and how it shaped decision-making, so that as we solicit input in the 2050 plan, people understand how their voices will be heard and used to change direction of the funding. Now, because we do this every 5 years, it's an incremental process. But as I look at the one pager that you've got here, it starts with visioning, which is the wide part of the funnel that completely ignores that we did this 5 years ago and it finished 3 years ago. So if there was some way to close the loop from the 2045 plan into the 2050 plan, recognizing it's a 25-year plan. I mean, it's not like maybe we could pick a few projects that we could show that were shaped because of that. But somehow close the loop so that we're not starting with a white sheet of paper.
Yes.
Every time.
Yes.
That people recognize, oh, there was a plan 5 years ago and it was very successful and it shaped the transportation decisions in these areas, and here's where it came short. And that gives us a nice springboard into the 2050 plan.
And John, your point, I mean, we've been doing these not just 5 years, but 35 years.
Right.
This is my third time through the cycle.
Yeah, the Huguenot Bridge, we started that in what, 1990? It was finished up in 2015.
Yeah.
And sometimes you kind of lose vision of, let's look in the rearview mirror to see what's
Yeah,
behind us now.
just a little review. We
I
don't need a
actually,
whole
Yeah.
bunch,
I
but
actually really love that because it's hard to get interest in 2050.
Yeah.
But if we can start to talk about those stories of, Huguenot was planned here.
1990.
I mean, I think that actually helps to sort of articulate that this is real.
yeah, well, that
It's not.
that goes with the with Holly's angle. There could be like little stories with a picture from 25 or 30 years ago, stories of the LRTP, but then still have this other sort of shaping document. But that gives you lots of stuff to talk about, and old pictures are always really cool.
I like stories of the LRTP, that's nice, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and Mr. Leonard, to your point about the blank page, I agree with you, that's hard. And maybe we should be clearer in here that we're not going to just give them a blank page. There are some kind of general parameters of like, these are the things in transportation that will always be true, and giving people something to respond to, but also leaving space for the inspirational and vision, like if people get excited about the possibility of something, so not like making them look at the small, but giving them a chance to be like, here's what we did, but
Well,
also what would you love?
When we did the plan 5 years ago, I thought it was really nice that we went through a prioritization
Yeah.
process of how did we feel about this and this, but that was done without any context. It was with the context that you bring, without the context of the last LRTP.
Yeah.
And that's all we need to do is bring in just a little bit of context. So when we're setting priorities, maybe just saying, well, this is what the priorities were last time, how have they changed? And I think people would respond differently to that kind of question than, what do you think?
Great.
Because it's
Yeah.
harder to come
Oh, I
out from
agree,
nowhere.
yeah.
I know a lot of people liked Connect RVA 2045. That was the name of the plan, right? Yeah, a lot of people liked it, and I think a lot of people would love to see a blurb of like, remember Connect RVA 2045? We're gonna do that again, and here's what you decided was a priority last time, and here's what we've done with that, 2 paragraphs or something, I think would be really nice
Great.
for
I can take
people.
that feedback, thank you.
Just, can I say one more thing? I'm sorry.
Absolutely, of course.
Just thinking about some of the other feedback, this is helpful for me to hear because I think about the comments about, sidewalks and, I mean, the region has made tremendous progress, right? In moving toward more of a multimodal investment strategy. And so I feel like it's, as people who live and breathe this work every day, we know that inherently, but maybe being a little bit more explicit about that to get people to feel like their input matters will help, because we have come a long way. And I remember 2 cycles ago, Sulab, you might remember this, but Tiffany had put together those charts of where we were from a time band perspective of diversity of investment and how that had evolved over time. And I remember that being very impactful for me as a new resident of the region to see, you know, we were 90% highway investment at this date, and then we've moved to much more of a diverse modal investment over time and where we were headed. And I still remember that from almost 10 years ago. So
If you can find how many miles of sidewalk were constructed in the last 5 years, I think that would be a really cool number to see. Obviously that's a really hard number to get.
I don't know if we can.
And I can tell you whether you like it or not, in Richmond in 2010, when I was on the mayor's commission, we technically didn't have a single mile of bike lane. We had a quarter of a mile, it might be argued.
Yeah.
Got a long way to go, but you know, walk out on the streets and
We've come a long way.
the world has changed quite a bit.
Yeah,
Yes, it has.
great. Thank
Capitol
you.
Trail.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you all for that feedback. So I think we are looking for an action, right? Which is that we need to essentially say, does this feel directionally correct? And we like what's happening, maybe with the addition of some stories of the LRTP, and the connection of here is what we did before to tee people up to a vision statement, because I think we do want to leave room for inspiration, but to connect the dots for them. And then what we would do is we would recommend this go to the LRTP advisory work group to say, yes, start moving on it. And we will come back to you as we go throughout this process, once we actually have some more specific steps. But does this feel directionally sound? I think that's what we're asking for today, is that right?
So to summarize, we're asking for a motion to recommend that the LRTP advisory work group continue moving forward with this, with the feedback that we've generated here today.
I think so.
Those 2 things can be attached together
Yes.
with our recommendation
Yes.
that they continue in this direction.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Would anybody like to make that motion or amend it?
I'll make the motion.
Okay. A second?
Second.
All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Okay,
Thank you all for that
sufficient for
great
what you need?
discussion.
Yes,
Great.
absolutely.
Lovely.
Great.
All right. You have
Me
something
again,
to say?
yes, I just have, this is not gonna take 5 minutes, this is more just us teeing you up for the next very big cool thing we're doing. We're doing so many very big cool things, thank you for helping us do that. So, Pathways to the Future, Regional Symposium 2025 is going to be March 14th, 2025. Save the date, it's a Friday. This is our new iteration of what we have, for the last 2 years, been calling Plan RVA Day. And we changed the name to more align with all of the work that we're doing, which is what the Pathways to the Future name is. It's about the regional strategic plan. Plan RVA is tasked with coming up with a set of kind of actions and strategies for how the region can be healthy. And a lot of that is the work that we're doing, transportation, environment, community development, emergency management. But that day is actually gonna be expanded to a whole day, and that we will have modules around all the types of important regional work that we are either doing directly or working on with partners. And so one of those modules will be the work that we had previously shared in our transportation forum. So instead of separating it out, we said, hey, let's put it together in this bigger day that's about all of the great work we're doing. And because we have exceeded all of our spaces now, because it's so popular, we're gonna make it bigger and get a different space. So we've moved the space out of here. We are currently researching locations that can hold a wider audience, to be able to include all of the kinds of things that we're doing as a regional body and welcome the public in. And I would add that I, for sure, am going to have some sort of community engagement activity there because we will be directly in the middle of some engagement for the LRTP. And so for CTAC, we don't yet know what that looks like, but we would love your help in, once we have a schedule and a location, spreading the word about it, and then also thinking about how can you show up as an expert in this work and helping us engage our audiences for that.
So this is what we've been doing at Main Street Station.
Yes, part of the transportation forum and then our Plan RVA day that we had here that was about bigger things, or sorry, it's just more things than just transportation, yeah.
We're combining those two events
Yep.
to be on the same day.
Yeah,
With the hope that we can start to engage a broader audience. So we have our transportation stakeholders that were really committed to the transportation forum, but there's more and more overlap with the other work that we do and vice versa. And so we want to be able to cross-pollinate that. I think we're still internally among staff talking about what the actual content modules look like, but I think there will be an opportunity for people to probably a la carte register if they really only want to come to one thing. But the idea would be that for those that are willing to spend more time, they could start to explore the interconnections between the topical areas. And I think that there will be an opportunity for us to talk with you all about what that content could and should be, particularly as it relates to the LRTP this year, but ongoing, we hope that you all will help us think about how do we use this symposium as a way to spark conversation in the community about the issues that our region is facing looking into the future. And just again, hearing the respective expertise of this group, I think there's a lot of intel to mine from you all about what you think those conversations need to look like.
that's really it for now. Save the date, get excited, thank you.
Lovely. You're never gonna believe this, but
It's me again?
it's you again.
I promise this is the last time I'm gonna talk today. So the other business, number one, the outreach template, this was linked in your agenda as well. And Sid, I didn't ask you to bring this up, but I suppose could you click on that as well and bring it up if you wouldn't mind? This is the toolkit of talking points that you all asked for before, that you've seen before, but I'm reminded, again, we're busy, our inboxes are full, so it could not hurt for us to bring this back to you multiple times to say, here are some talking points that you would ask for of like, how do I explain what my role in CTAC is? And what I'm being tasked with, kind of this new initiative that we started at the beginning of last year, which is, hey, here's what CTAC's gonna do. It's gonna help us spread the word to communities, but how do I talk about this in an intelligent way? So this was just a short blurb about essentially what CTAC is, and then a place for you to pop in any kind of specific messaging about an engagement activity. So that
Transportation or not?
yeah, so like the engagement activity for rural transportation, you can just copy and paste that right in here. That way you have some sort of framing language. So this is not very detailed other than this. Is there stuff at the bottom, Sid? I can't remember what's at the bottom. Oh, like, and then who we are, and then linking to our information. So again, you don't need to be an expert on everything we do. This is essentially just, here's what my role of CTAC is, and here's the thing I'd like you to know about what they're doing based on the fact that I care about this work. So that's just electronic, so you have it. If you want to copy and paste or print it, take it with you. But mostly it was so that you can copy and paste that language. People are asking for the language to send in an email or put on social media, or if you're asking to go somewhere, that you could have that to share what that was. That's it.
Great. All right, we have agency updates from Martha.
The newsletter was included in the packet linked that was just distributed at the end of August. So we're on the cusp of having another newsletter come out later this month. Is everybody getting those in email?
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, okay. And then we have, as you all might be aware, we have started this practice of including in all of our agenda packets, just updates from the last meeting of our other boards, so that it's a quick reference in case you're interested in following what the latest effort from the CTAC or the TPO, just so that our respective bodies know what's happening across the different entities. So hopefully that's useful information, and we're happy to kind of elaborate if you're curious about something that's happening. But we've got the CVTA update there summarizing the last meeting, set of meetings and what's upcoming next, the same for the Plan RVA Commission and the same for the TPO. I will just alert everybody, we'll have a formal communication coming out about this in the next, probably today or tomorrow, but if you did sign up for the port tour on October 3rd, just as a heads up, we'll be sending you information that we'll share that we are gonna have to make some changes to that arrangement. We're gonna need to postpone the date. So more information about that, but I just thought I'd mention that in the, since we're here together today, and we can give more information about what's happening with that, but just as a, stay tuned, if you've saved that on your calendar and registered, we're gonna be sending out information that will let you know that we need to change the date, and we'll be looking at dates in spring of 2025.
But consideration, if the arrangements get too complicated, there's been a lot of interest in just going back down to Deepwater Terminal, which would be significantly easier to manage for a larger group.
It's not a logistical issue.
Okay.
It's a conflict that the port facilities have. And so just given where we are in the fall, we just think weather-wise, we're gonna have a hard time, but we'll have more information about sort of the ins and outs. But the logistics part has been actually kind of amazing in how it's come together. We're really grateful for their support and the partnership with GRTC. It's other factors beyond all of our control that have caused us to need to postpone.
I tell you that up to this point, that I mean, for years we've talked about, we put a bunch of money into the Port of Richmond. And I'd love to see an update on what's going on and if those investments are paying off.
Yeah, I'll be talking to Dr. Newbill, since we won't be able to have the official briefing and the visit to the Richmond port in October. We'll be talking about that, so I think we could absolutely bring some kind of a briefing here as well, because to your point, it's been a tremendous level of investment and a game changer for the region. So we can look at that for a future agenda topic here. Not to replace the visit, but just maybe to whet everyone's
A
appetite.
little different scale there.
Great, yeah, thank you for that.
Any other comments on Martha's update? If not, then we can move to member comments. We kind of put a pin in the discussion we were having earlier. I heard pretty consistently that this group cares about representing the interests of seniors and their mobility needs. Lisa, you talked about it at the very beginning, and then it came up a couple of times throughout this discussion. We had a couple of pieces of information that it seems like we're going to get an update from you later on, as far as like context for the survey and increasing representation on this board of organizations that represent senior members. Did anybody else want to add on to that discussion or continue it? We have a little bit of time left in the meeting time. So if anybody has something else they wanted to add, they're welcome to do so.
We have a lot of seniors in Charles City, but Charles City is so rural that most of the roads, you can't hardly pass 2 tractor trailers. And a lot of tractor trailers are out there. We have a lot of sod farms out there. We have a lot of wood industry. Pulpwood and everything's grown there. So it's definitely a unique county compared to the other counties in here. That is, most people that move to Charles City want the complete ruralness and quiet that it has there. I mean, at 6 o'clock, it's nobody on the roads out there. So.
Are you familiar with Charles City County's other planning efforts, their comprehensive plan or anything, and whether that seems amenable to the needs?
A little bit familiar with it. I mean, they're working on a comprehensive plan now.
Okay, great. It could be interesting to see what that comprehensive plan effort is doing to incorporate the needs of seniors in Charles City County as well, and their mobility needs. Because I imagine they're completely different in Charles City County than in Richmond or Henrico or many parts of Chesterfield, where I think walkability and ADA compliance with sidewalks and things like that is sort of the top priority, whereas in Charles City County, it might be a different story.
I don't even think there's a sidewalk in Charles.
Yeah.
At the courthouse.
Courthouse is about the only one.
Yeah, that's interesting. Anybody else thoughts on this that they wanted to bring to the group? Seeing none, the next meeting is at November 21st. It will be back on a Thursday, correct?
Pretty sure.
Yeah, because I know that this was unusual,
Yeah.
meeting on a Wednesday. Thank you, everybody, for making it to the unusual Wednesday meeting. It is back on a Thursday on November 21st. Anything else you